my company, Precision Hydration, and myself. Precision Hydration are now about 2 years old. We make electrolyte drinks like a lot of other companies, but we make electrolyte drinks in different strengths to match different sweat compositions in different individuals. I'm Jonny Tye. I'm a flat water canoeist. I've got quite a strong background in marathon canoeing. And now I'm specialising more in the sprint disciplines, trying to get to the next Olympic Games. This is how I support myself as an athlete, coming around talking to people about hydration. When you exercise, obviously you get hot and your body needs to stay at a constant temperature. So sweating is the most effective way of keeping the body at a good temperature to work. Something that people don't realise is humans sweat a lot more than other mammals per unit area of the body. So some people might think an elephant or a horse will sweat a lot more than us, but per unit area of the body we lose a lot more. And that gave us an advantage back when we were chasing deers around in hunting. The downside is we need to think about replacing what we're losing to prevent excessive dehydration. There is a huge amount of controversy surrounding how much we should be drinking and what we should be drinking. There's a massive amount of talk out there about different ideas and what works for different people. Similarly with nutrition, we were talking earlier about nutrition talk this morning, that again, there's so much advice out there. I'm going to try and briefly look at some of the advice that's out there and narrow down to what I personally and what we would recommend is precision hydration. So going back to 100 years ago, James E. Sullivan said, don't go and have a drinking and eating in a marathon race. Some prominent runners do, but it's not beneficial. So don't bother, basically, was his advice. That's contrary to what we all think now, and that's only 100 years ago. Fast forwarding 50 years to the days of Thomas Simpson, very famous cyclist, died on the Tour. When asked about what he drinks, he said four small bottles for a long stage of the Tour, and a long stage of the Tour then is a long, full day's riding, you'll see. So it's frowned upon to drink more. Avoid drinking when racing, especially in hot weather. Drink as little as possible, and with a liquid not too cold. It's only a question of willpower. When you drink too much, you'll perspire and lose your strength. Genuinely, people believe this, and people were really suffering. Obviously, poor old Tommy suffered a little bit more than everybody else. Going forward again to only 20 years ago, Gatorade came out with completely the opposite advice, saying 40 fluid ounces every hour for your performance good stuff. That's nearly 1.2 litres an hour. That's a huge amount of fluids you're consuming. If you're riding on the Tour for 8 hours in a day, that's a huge amount of fluid. Massive amount of fluid. Around the same time, the American College of Sports Medicine came out and said between 150 to 300 ml every 15 minutes. Similarly, huge amount of fluid. Massive amount of fluid. So that's kind of the advice that's flipped from virtually nothing to a huge amount in the space of 80 or 100 years. Now, have you heard of hyponatremia? Have you come across the term hyponatremia? So, hyponatremia was pretty unheard of until relatively recently. And since that advice from those big companies has changed, it's become more of an issue, actually. And that's hyponatremia is where you drink so much fluid you dilute the electrolytes in your body and effectively drown it. Your cells will swell, and in extreme cases you start to get cells bursting, and some people die. So on the London Marathon, occasionally you hear of somebody dying of hyponatremia, and that is just somebody knocking back way too much fluid and not retaining any electrolytes. And unfortunately they can die from it. And as I was saying, the increase of hyponatremia cases has been heavily implicated from that advice that's been thrown around. So to reflect this, in 2007, the American College of Sports Medicine revised their excessive guidelines to say, drink to prevent excessive dehydration, and that was said to be about 2% of your body weight. So you might have heard Lucasade had a TV ad a while ago that said if you lose more than 2% of your body weight, you're going to lose about 20% of your performance. I personally would say that's utter rubbish, because, well, let's go into it. So that this man, Cameron Selassie, pretty good runner. Just an example from him. He ran the Berlin Marathon in about 2:04, pretty handy time. And he nearly lost just under 10% of his body weight across that 2-hour race. But his last mile was the quickest. So going back to what the American College of Sports Medicine said, if you lose 2% of your body weight, you're going to suffer. But this man absolutely smashed his last mile and was running on that record marathon pace at that kind of level of dehydration. So this was a few years ago now. There's been some more studies to look into that, and here we go, he's not actually that thirsty. Similar findings have come from some other studies since then. So this is a minor correlation between body weight change and finishing position and finishing time. So if this is your body weight along here, if you stay the same weight, you'd be on this axis here. This dude's actually put on weight during the race, which is quite impressive, and he should probably get an award for that. But there is a minor correlation between losing up to sort of 7.5%, 10% of the body weight and a decent finish time. So he wasn't on his own. He's an elite athlete, but it was reflected across quite a lot of people.
What could it mean that person gained weight in the race?
Drinking a lot, a serious amount of fluid, and that is very impressive. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't have finished. So the question is why does that happen? Why do we lose weight and continue to perform when clearly all the guidelines say we shouldn't be performing? It appears that the body will voluntarily dehydrate to an extent to get you through that period of fight or flight hunting, as it were. And as individuals, it's going to be very different. So some people, like Cameron Selassie, can lose up to 10% and they're still cracking on doing some seriously good work. Other people will probably get to more like 3% of body weight change and start to suffer a little bit. That again is an individual thing. In terms of fluid volume replacement, what we would say, precision hydration, is you need to learn to listen to your body and drink to thirst. And that is the key message to go across. I say to people, if you had a dog, how often do you have to tell your dog to go and have a drink? Your dog will go and have a drink when his body tells it to have a drink. We're all animals, and those big companies, for me, want to shift you a lot of drink. So they're going to tell you to drink before you get thirsty, otherwise it's too late, because they want to sell more drinks to you, because they're going to make more money. It's all about listening to your body and the signs of when you need to have a drink and responding to that. So that's kind of fluid intake in a short period of time. Huge amount of advice that's changed massively, and it is still changing. But the best out there is to learn to listen to your own body's needs and replace as you go on. So what about electrolytes? Precision Hydration make electrolytes alongside a lot of other companies. Again, it is a controversial issue. Dr. Tim Noakes, quite a controversial dude. He thinks it's completely unnecessary to bother with electrolytes. Other people do swear by it. I'm one of those people. I really suffered before I started taking my electrolytes during training and racing. The best way to talk about this, I think, is that you can split the population into 3/3. 1/3 of the population are going to absolutely swear by this, taking on electrolytes, and they're going to really benefit from it. Those people will probably have quite a high sodium concentration in their sweats. They lose a lot of salt per litre and need to replace a bit more, so those people can get cramp and suffer, particularly in long endurance events. Other people like me, I fall into this category, will use it as a marginal gain, and it just takes one of those variables out of my racing equation. I an athlete, I want to take as many things out of the equation that are going to slow me down or prevent me from getting from A to B as quickly as possible. For me, that's one of those things. Sometimes it makes a big difference. If we're going to race in Singapore in crazy climate, it's going to make a huge difference to me. But day to day, it's a marginal gain. And another third of people will probably fall into Tim notices, follow and say, you know what, electrolytes don't really do much for me. Fine. So let's look at human sweat. Human sweat is made up of electrolytes. Your key electrolytes are sodium, potassium, and magnesium. There are a lot of electrolyte drinks out there. High Five, New, Gatorade, Lucozade, Powerade, there's millions. Elite water, coconut water, those kind of things. Human sweat is predominantly made up of sodium. So if you look at the losses per litre, the other electrolytes are very, very small compared to sodium. And sodium varies massively among individuals. So I lose exactly 1,024 milligrams of sodium per litre. So I'm pretty middle of the road in terms of sodium losses. The founder of Precision Hydration, Andy Blow, loses about 1,700 milligrams of sodium per litre. And I've tested people who lose about 300. There's a huge range of sweat sodium concentrations in the population, but everyone drinks the same strength drinks because people only make one strength drink predominantly, which is down around 500 milligrams. So going back to the fact there's loads of drinks out there, some drinks are really high in these other electrolytes. So coconut water is very high in potassium, which is okay, but you don't really lose that much potassium, so why do you need to take loads of potassium when your body's then going to deal with that and get rid of it? We want to look at replacing exactly what you lose so your body can deal with it in the best possible way. So going back to the variation in humans, there is a massive variation in sodium concentration across the human population. Our biggest customer is the RFU, the rugby. They're playing this afternoon. Hopefully we're going to get back in time for the game. I sweat tested all those guys last year, and sweat tested all the new guys to the squad this year. And just across a group of 80 rugby players, a prime example, we've seen the full range of sweat sodium concentrations across that group of players, and they drink full range of sweat sodium drinks. So, alongside this concentration issue, some people sweat a lot, and some people don't sweat a lot, and that's going to change whether it's a day like today and you're out running a marathon, or whether you're sat playing silly games in the rain. So you're going to sweat a different amount doing different things. So the key thing to think about is your net sodium losses. So combining your concentration, which we can measure, and your sweat rate, the volume of sweat you lose. I'm quite a sweaty guy, especially when I'm working hard. So I'd probably fall into high rate and relatively high concentration. It's not ridiculously high concentration, I'm just above average, but it's pretty reasonably high. So my net sodium losses, when it's a day like this and I'm working really hard, are really quite high. So a high electrolyte drink is good for me. Some people have a really low sweat rate and don't lose much sodium, so they don't need to replace as many electrolytes during their session or race. And the other misconception is some people have a low rate of sweat, so some people don't sweat a lot, so they think, well, I don't need to replace it. But what they could be losing is a really high concentration. So their net sodium losses could still be very similar to somebody who has a really high rate of sweat, but a very low concentration of sodium in their sweat. So their net losses are very, very similar. So you can't actually tell how much you're losing until you understand your concentration losses, if that makes sense. So, okay, yeah, no problem. So looking at some of the other drinks out there that we were talking about, their sodium content. So Lucozade is about 500, Gatorade similarly, Powerade slightly less, SIS slightly less, 500. Noon's a good one, 720 milligrams of sodium per litre. Elite water is ridiculously low. Average person we tested loses 920 milligrams of sodium per litre. So that, you know, pretty much half of the needs of those individuals, the average person, are going to be replaced by these drinks. So you're going to look at nearly double the amount of electrolytes in those drinks. Precision Hydration, H2pro, it's us, we make these drinks in different strengths, covering the whole range. So we have a very, very low one at 250 milligrams, one at 500, which is similar to everybody else, one about double what they are, which is pretty much what we've seen as the average person, and then one right up at 1500 milligrams of sodium per litre. So you see, the average person is about 920 milligrams of sodium per litre, and all these drinks are around 500 or below. So there's two things we've spoken about. One is your volume losses. Don't be too excessive with your volume losses, with your replacement, sorry. Drink to thirst and listen to your body is the key message for that one. The concentration, again, it's very difficult to tell what you're losing in concentration until you have a sweat test. We, Precision Hydration and Physio4Life do these as well, do sweat tests, which is a non-exercise sweat test. You sit down with a couple of electrodes on your arm, on your forearm using a chemical called pilocarpine. Take a sweat sample, run it through our machine, and within about 25 minutes you know exactly how much sodium you lose per litre. That is predominantly a genetic factor assigned to you, and that won't change. So once you've had your test, you know where you stand, you know how much sodium you lose per litre of sweat, and then we can prescribe you the correct strength drinks so you're replacing what you lose. So it's individualised. Have your sweat test, you know where you stand. Sit down with myself or Mark or somebody at Physio4Life and talk through your electrolyte needs and what events you're doing, what your training volume is like, where you're doing that, what sport you're doing, and we can look at which of the 4 drinks matches you for different situations. So personally, I have my sweat test and I lose 1,024 milligrams of sodium per litre. So 1,000, the orange coloured tube is the one for me. But I also drink the 250, which is a really low level of electrolytes. I drink that during the day. So today is a perfect example. I've been running around quite a bit today. I had a session this morning, so I drank 1,000 during training. After training, I get a bit of 250 in my system just to keep a low level of electrolytes in my system. So I use those two alongside each other. And then if I had a big race, if I had a marathon race in Europe, and it was really hot, you can preload really quite effectively on electrolytes as well. So that's where these 2 really high strengths come in quite handy for me. With the 1500, if I was racing on a Saturday morning, I'd drink on the Friday nights just to boost my electrolyte levels or replace some of my fluid with that high concentration drink. Boost your blood volume slightly and get more electrolytes flowing around your system. So when you start your race, your electrolyte tank is full before you start, rather than having a half full tank. Your depletion is going to come earlier on in the race. Does that make sense? So that's run through very quickly what I wanted to convey today. Any thoughts?
When you were talking electrolytes,
Yeah.
as you showed us before, 90% of that is sodium, which is salt. And you're talking about preloading.
Yeah.
Salty dinner before, is that not going to give you, and you talk about drinking for training, that's
Yeah.
fine, but then drinking during the day to keep that topped up, how much of diet is really going to be giving you that? Because we all get told we have too much salt already,
Yeah.
so banging in a load of electrolytes, is that not going to be overload?
So, table salt is sodium chloride. The sodium within these drinks is sodium bicarb. So, having an excess of chloride ions in your body is going to cause a potential ion imbalance, which is not necessarily a good thing. So, in answer to your question, that this is probably a better form of sodium to take on. Your body can deal with slightly better. And in terms of sodium, if you smash back a Domino's pizza this evening, you would be taking on far in excess of the highest drink on the table. In terms of an electrolyte drink, that's really very high, but in terms of intake of sodium generally, it's not a huge amount, if that makes sense.
But would it be beneficial? So you've got a race the next day, you have a pizza that night before, and you go, right, I need to preload. Do you actually need to be drinking that?
I personally function a lot better if I preload on electrolytes the day before. If you want to preload on electrolytes from a Domino's pizza, then that's wicked. But you've also got to eat Domino's pizza alongside with a huge amount of sodium in there. And it's sodium chloride, so you can build up chloride in your body. So these are just your electrolytes. There's no carbohydrates in there at all. It is just taking on the electrolytes that you require. And if you're doing a longer event, obviously you're going to have carbohydrate drink or some form of fuel, and all these are the same flavour. It's a kind of mild, citrusy, really unoffensive flavour. So you can add it to a carbohydrate drink, so that there will be some electrolytes within a carbohydrate drink. So take some of the high five drinks, for instance. They've got around 450-ish milligrams of sodium per litre. For me, if I was to drink their carbohydrate drink, I'd put 500 tablet in there, so that it's approximately 1,000, so I'm replacing what I require.
So let's talk too much.
Yeah.
What starts happening, let's say you don't get sweat tested and you go, right, I think I'm a big sweater,
Yeah.
start playing about loads of electrolytes during a race, what's going to happen to you?
Okay, so short term, you're gonna process that and just pee out the excess electrolytes. Potentially long term, there is a negative effect of doing that related to excess sodium. So the issues that are related to excess salt that everybody knows. But again, it's on a smaller scale. This is not a huge amount of salt. It's just a very salty drink compared to the other drinks on the market. The reason we have a test is because the idea behind it is to replace what you lose. So equally, if you're drinking one of the other drinks that has a really low level of electrolytes in it, you lose a lot. It's the same the other way around. If you're a low sodium sweater and you're taking on a lot more, your body's got to deal with that. So it's equally as bad to be taking on a huge amount as a far, not enough, if that makes sense. Probably short term, I probably would have less issue with you taking on slightly more electrolytes than you need. But the idea is to replace what you lose, so that's the idea of having a test.
You said earlier that when you do the test, it's showing your sodium
Yeah.
and your sweat. So is it like more dramatic for that?
Yeah.
But surely does your time not affect it at all?
No, not really. No. The only time your concentration will change slightly is if you go somewhere very hot and get acclimatised. But that concentration won't change enough for you to be thinking about changing your concentration drink, for me. So I lose about 1,000. If I went to Australia for 3 months, I'd probably come down slightly on my sodium losses per litre, but it wouldn't be significant enough to warrant me dropping a strength drink. When you come back again, it'll move back to where your test figures were.
Just on that, sort of someone who's very acclimatised to a hot place,
Yeah.
they are going to sweat less, but maybe genetically their concentration is going to be set.
Yeah.
But as far as their fluid intake,
It'll be
needs to
different.
be less than, so they might take 1,000 in only a litre, whereas you do the same race and have to take 3 litres and whatever your salt
Yeah.
thing is.
But again, going back to volume, if you're acclimatised to a certain climate, your body isn't going to tell you to drink as much. So as long as you've got your drink mixed up to the correct strength, so all this is 1 tablet and 500 ml, and you make the correct strength and drink to thirst, listen to the science of when you need to drink. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's in a nutshell what we do at Precision Hydration. Mark's, I am available to do sweat tests today if you wanted to do one. They usually cost £96 at Physio4Life, but I'll do them at £75 today. And I think Mark would probably, I haven't spoken to him, I'm sure he'll go back with some discounted tubes as well if you wanted to take some away to try. Just like £70 as well. That's how we go. So that's
Cool.
that's electrolytes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you very much.